Hello, friends. What the hell was that? Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. I gotta find out what that was. Hold on. I just listened back and realized that you couldn't hear that, so now you're wondering what's wrong with me. But trust me, there was a noise. Today I'm going to be speaking with Jason. Now, Jason has type 1 diabetes. He got it when he was 18. He's now 45. His son, Wesley, is 12, has type 1 diabetes since he was 2. His son, Cooper, is 10, diagnosed 11 months old. And his daughter, who is 6, well, she currently doesn't have type 1 diabetes. But there's other people, and we're going to find out all about it. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. When you place your first order for AG1 with my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a free year supply of vitamin D. drinkag1.com/juicebox. Don't forget to save 40% off of your entire order at CozyEarth.com. All you have to do is use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. That's JUICEBOX at checkout to save 40% at CozyEarth.com. I know that Facebook has a bad reputation, but please give the private Facebook group for the Juicebox Podcast a healthy once-over. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. The group now has 47,000 members in it. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screen4type1.com for more info. Having an easy-to-use and accurate blood glucose meter is just one click away. ContourNext.com/juicebox. That's right, today's episode is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Eversense CGM. And sure, all CGM systems use transcutaneous sensors that are inserted into the skin and last 7 to 14 days. But the Eversense sensor is inserted completely under the skin, lasting 6 months. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox.
I'm Jason. I live in the middle of Iowa, and I'm type 1 diabetic. I have 2 children that are also type 1 diabetic. And I believe today that Dave and I are going to be talking about my dad, who is also type 1 diabetic.
You want to tell people why you called me Dave?
Why I called you Dave? Well, apparently there was some review of your podcast that referred to you as Dave, which is telling you how much they pay attention to the actual content they're listening to.
It was a really great review about how fantastic the podcast was and how great I was, and then called me Dave. And I was like, I love that. It could have been a typo. It could be that this person believes my name is Dave. I don't care. You know, I am maybe one of the few smaller podcasters who don't come on and go, hello, everybody. I'm your host. You know what I mean? And then my name. Right. And like, I don't do that because I think, I mean, if you want to really know why, I think it makes you sound like you're small time.
Right.
Yeah. I don't turn on the television and not know who somebody is I'm looking at. I don't need to be introduced to them. I know sometimes, like in older media, a host will come onto a TV show and be like, you know, hello, welcome to the show. I'm David Letterman, like that kind of thing. But that's just, to me, an old idea. So like Moving forward, they're huge podcasts. I've never once turned one on and been like, hey, everybody, my name's Billy. I'm the host today. And I'm like, okay. If they don't know, they'll figure it out. And if they don't figure it out, they're not listening to you. So anyway, maybe I was wrong. Just in case that guy's listening. Hey, everyone. This is the Juicebox Podcast, and I'm your host, Scott Benner, not Dave.
Oh, hey, Scott.
Hey, what's up, Dave? How many people right now do you think were like, oh, Scott? Or is it just him?
I thought this was Dave.
Yeah. Well, now on the Facebook group, if you or a couple of other intrepid people call me Dave, then then people are like, that's not Dave. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is going to go on forever.
It gets engagement, though. So people asking questions.
We're feeding that algorithm.
That's right.
Jason, we're feeding the algorithm and making it do something. That's a whole job that I wouldn't want to take the time to be boring and explain to people, but getting a Facebook group to serve the people who were in it well is a lot about making sure conversations are happening. And, every once in a while, somebody will ask a question, and it's kind of like maybe a beginner question. And somebody will rush in and go, that question's been asked 50 times, and just search the group. And every time I'm like, no, bad. Don't just search the group. Ask the question. Because if you start searching the group and treating the group like it's an encyclopedia, the group will die.
Right.
Like the algorithm needs to see people asking questions and answering questions. And it's more human, and I think leads to people understanding things a little quicker. So let's start with you. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was 18. I just turned 18. It was in October, and I actually voted for president for the very first time from my hospital bed.
Who'd you vote for? Oh, no, you don't have to tell me that.
It was Bill Clinton at that time.
Okay. How old are you now?
45.
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Time is terrible. Oh, my God. Okay. Let's run through it. You have 2 kids.
I have 3 kids total.
3. 2 of them have type 1. How old are they?
Our oldest is 12 years old, and he was diagnosed at 2.5 years old. And our middle boy, who just turned 10, he was diagnosed at 11 months old.
Wow.
And our daughter, she is 6 years old.
And you're worried because she hasn't reached 10 or 12 yet?
Yeah. She's made it so far, so it's thankfully she hasn't shown any signs yet, but we're prepared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd have to be.
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, if you don't have enough experience to handle it, then who does?
Right.
And then your father, type 1.
Yeah.
Do you know when he was diagnosed?
He was diagnosed, I think, around 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was back in the Stone Ages. So
you're the one that really pushed the envelope as far as you all go, making it to 18. Yeah. Okay, so he was 3.
Yeah. And, just to tack on to that, my sister, who is a couple years younger than me, she's also type 1.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
How old when she was diagnosed? You remember?
I think it was just 14 or 15.
Okay. Beat her easy. Okay. Now, wow. Do you have other brothers and sisters?
Nope, just one sister.
Okay. How about other autoimmune stuff?
No. And I know you're going to say, but, did you? No, I don't think there is.
You don't think there just is? It's just type 1 diabetes. You guys are what they call hyper-focused.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. When you have type 1 and your sister has type 1 and your father has type 1, when you are getting ready to have a family, what runs through your head about the possibility of diabetes in children? This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Eversense. And Eversense is the implantable CGM that lasts 6 months. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Have you ever been running out the door and knocked your CGM off? Or had somewhere to be and realized that your adhesive was about to fall off? That won't happen with Eversense. Eversense won't get sweaty and slide off. It won't bang into a door jamb. And it lasts 6 months, not just a couple days or a week. The Eversense CGM has a silicone-based adhesive for its transmitter, which you change every day. So it's not one of those super sticky things that's designed to stay on you forever and ever, even though we know they don't work sometimes. But that's not the point. Because it's not that kind of adhesive, you shouldn't see any skin irritations. So if you've had skin irritations with other products, maybe you should try Eversense. Unique, implantable, and accurate. So if you're tired of dealing with things falling off or being too sticky or not sticky enough or not staying on for the life of the sensor, you probably want to check out Eversense. EversenseCGM.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. ContourNext.com/juicebox. That's the link you'll use to find out more about the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. When you get there, there's a little bit at the top. You can click right on blood glucose monitoring. I'll do it with you. Go to meters, click on any of the meters. I'll click on the NextGen, and you're going to get more information. It's easy to use and highly accurate. SmartLight provides a simple understanding of your blood glucose levels. And of course, with second chance sampling technology, you can save money with fewer wasted test strips. As if all of that wasn't enough, the Contour NextGen also has a compatible app for an easy way to share and see your blood glucose results. ContourNext.com/juicebox. And if you scroll down at that link, you're going to see things like a buy now button. You could register your meter after you purchase it. Or what is this? Download a coupon. Oh, receive a free Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. Do tell. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Head over there now. Get the same accurate and reliable meter that we use.
Well, at that point in time, I'd mentioned it to my endocrinologist a few times, and they always said, it's a very low percentage chance of that happening. So I really didn't give any thought to it, and I don't think it would have changed my mind at all.
Okay.
It wasn't a surprise when it happened, but it still hurt. It hurt a lot.
Yeah, I bet. 2 years old, right?
Yeah, 2 years old and 11 months old. So
yeah. Arden was just 2 years old, and I recall it feeling like the promise of my life was revoked, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Because we were a young family, and things were, we weren't like killing it or anything, but it was going well, and you could see that we were moving in the direction we intended. We had bought a very small house recently, and I was like, I grew up renting my whole life, and it's like, wow, we're doing it. You know what I mean? Like we're getting out of the hole that somebody started us off in. And then that happened, and it felt like the hole we were in got thrown into a different hole. So how about your wife? Do you think she ever even considered it?
I don't think so. I don't think she thought about it at all. Like, it wasn't on her radar. And I think part of that's because I've been fairly well managed my entire life. So she only saw a few lows here and there and didn't really, partake in any of my care for it because, I'm an adult guy and I can do it myself. So
do you have any hindsight on that? Should you have made her more aware of it?
I think so. I think in general, people should do that more often. I think it's important for people to more understand, I think, what's wrong with your significant other.
You have any idea why you didn't?
No, I talked to my mom about this recently and asked her about that. And she said, I think it's just a guy thing, but I'm not even sure it's just a guy thing. I think it's people in general because, people are just worried about showing a weakness.
Yeah.
And especially a weakness like type 1 diabetes where it's not visible most of the time.
Yeah, it's not like it's sort of the invisible stuff, right? Like,
yeah.
Like that's why I think anxiety or mental illness is even harder to talk about because you're like, there's an unseen thing that just tackles me and
right.
I don't hear it coming and I don't know how to get out of the way of it. And, just once in a while, randomly, my blood sugar might get really low. And
right.
I could get into a situation where there's nothing I could do about it. And now I'm like left open to hope that the world around me helps me and gets me back here again.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough. Your father not share it with your mother?
She did not really partake in any of his care either. And he was very, very, very private about it. I would say so much so that my sister and I really had no clue or weren't very knowledgeable about how to treat him if he was low.
Mm-hmm.
We'd only seen it happen a few times because he was high most of the time. And I remember one time, I'd gotten home from school, probably early teens, sitting in my bedroom, dorking around, and I hear my dad's truck pull up in the driveway, and I hear kind of a crash outside. I get up out of my bed, and then he comes stumbling through the door, pale, sweating, shaking. I ran to the bathroom where the glucose tablets were at, and I grabbed one glucose tablet and took it out to him and made him eat it. And then nothing was happening. So I poured him a glass of water and just dumped a bunch of sugar into it. And he drank that. And eventually he came around, but that's all I knew how to do at that point in time. And it wasn't like somebody came to me and said, hey, if he's low, do this.
Right.
It was more of just do what I thought was right, even though it wasn't enough at that point in time.
And you were in your teens at that point?
Yeah, probably 12 or 13.
That's a long time to live with somebody and not understand fundamentally what turns them back on. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. Look at you. And you figured it out though, right?
Yeah, we figured it out.
Yeah. Did that get you a
Didn't
puppy?
have to call an ambulance that day.
Yeah.
So.
Did you get a puppy out of that or anything? Do you remember?
No, but, I would say that my dad and I's relationship wasn't always incredibly close. And, he's not a guy that's going to come out and say, hey, I love you. He would say it in other ways. But after he kind of recovered from that low, I went back into my bedroom and I was like crying, sitting there because I was scared to death.
Yeah.
And he actually came in and gave me a hug at that point in time. And it's something that really sticks out in my mind, like having that care when somebody needs you.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of important.
Well, I guess you learn that being there for somebody is a way to get love, is a way to get love from them.
Right.
Yeah. It's because what other ways do you think you were performing as a child that did not result in a hug?
I don't quite understand what you're asking.
I guess the question is like, can you look back and see that you tried other things? Did you try being good at sports and thought that would make him say, I love you and give you a hug? Did you keep the house really clean? Were there other things you were doing that didn't result in a hug?
Plenty.
Oh, geez. All of them. Yeah.
All of them. No, it's, I don't think I was a terrible kid. And I always kind of tried to take interest in things that he may have been doing, whether it be working on his truck out in the garage or, working with him during summers. He owned his own business too. Mm-hmm. And we'd go work with him. My sister and I would. He treated us well when we were out there, paid us free lunch and gave us food and stuff that we wanted. But it wasn't like, oh yeah, thanks. This was an enjoyable time. I really enjoyed spending the time with you. It was on to the next job.
Do you do that as a father? Do you tell your kids that you enjoyed spending time with them?
I try not to do things that happened with my relationship with my dad. So I try to spend time with my kids. I try to instill that I love them all the time, give them hugs all the time. And I'm the primary type 1 caregiver in our house. So we have a lot of connection that way. And our daughter, she takes advantage of all this and always wants to go to the grocery store with me because she'll know that I'll buy her a candy when we check out. So
funny, isn't it? Like, I just realized as you're talking, like, my son full knows that I love and care about him. And so if I said to him, like, I have a project this weekend, I was like, hey, I'm going to be working on something this weekend I could use your hands for. And he goes, I'm probably busy. and it wasn't shitty. It was just like, no, I'm all right. And I realize now, like, if he was like running around going, I hope that guy loves me, he'd be like, yeah, Dad, I'll help. But instead he's like, no, thank you. I mean, you do see people manipulate people that way. You know what I mean? And that's not what your dad was doing. Your dad was just closed off.
Yeah. And I think, he was 69 when he died. So he grew up on a farm. So it was all about work. That's just kind of what his life revolved around, was working.
Yeah. I hear you. Like, get up, do the thing. I did the thing. It means I love you because I'm working hard for you. I didn't leave you. I didn't quit my job. I don't drink during the day. Like, I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do. It's weird that people can't see the whole picture. They get focused on one like aspect of it. And like, I'm doing a good job with this. So that means I love you and you know it. Come on. The other day, my son's back. Like, he left, he finished college. And he went and worked a job for a whole year in another city. He was like across the country and gone. And then he said to us, like, I've gotten as much out of this job as I can. If I want to move up, I'm going to have to take a different job. I want to come home and reorient myself and look for work again. And so we said, fine. And he had saved, actually very proud of him. He'd saved a bunch of money while he was working. And he came home and he's home now. And it's the end of March. He's been here for 3 months. And every day I see him educating himself and applying for work and, talking to people and making connections. And he's doing all the things he should be doing. And I think every day, God, I hope this kid has some success here. Like, I don't want this to drag on for him because, it might get a little bit of a bummer after a while. And then my next thought is, I hope he doesn't get a job because he'll leave. I just took a second yesterday and I said, hey, I want you to know that every day I see you, I think, oh, I hope this works out for Cole today. He's doing a good job. It's going to work out for him. It's coming. I'm sorry if he feels badly about it. I said, but man, my next thought is always, I hope you don't leave.
Right.
And like, we didn't hug or cry after that. There was no commercial. And then we came back to the Hallmark channel and like talked some more. Like, it was just like, that was it. And he didn't say much and we moved on. But I know he knows.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't, Jason, I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't know how to like adjust it. Like, I wonder if your dad thought he knows. And then you were over there going, I wish someone would talk to me about this once in a while. It's interesting. Did you ever talk to him about it?
No, not really. He wasn't much of a talker. You know, I kind of see that coming from his side of the family too. It's like my grandma is the same way, and his dad was the same way. Really didn't talk about it. It's rare on that side of the family for somebody to say, "Hey, I love you," and "Hey, come give me a hug." And it's kind of weird now with our kids, my wife and I's kids, when we go see great grandma, my grandma. They always insist on giving her a hug, you know, before we leave and say goodbye. And it's heartwarming to see that. And I can kind of see that tear in my grandma's eye whenever that happens.
Yeah. I wonder if she's thinking this is what we should have been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like it's too late, but it's not for her, right? She's getting a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So why were you so well managed if your father wasn't and also wasn't teaching you about diabetes?
I think it came down to seeing him not treat himself well. There were a few times, like growing up, where he would have lows in the middle of the night and the ambulance would come. I would know nothing of it. Like, no one told me about it until many years later that, you know, the ambulance came, paramedics came and took him away because he was low and my mom couldn't help him. And after hearing like those stories, it kind of made me want to do better because I knew it could be avoided with a little bit of effort.
Yeah.
And also, when my sister was diagnosed, she was diagnosed, you know, like a year before I was. She struggled really hard with it too. That also kind of made me say, "This is my mom. I can't rely on my dad to do this. This is me. I have to do it."
So did your sister figure it out?
She wasn't nearly as bad as my dad was with it, but she definitely struggled. She struggled with burnout quite a bit. And she kind of saw the opposite of my dad. You know, she saw the lows or heard about the lows and didn't want to be low. So she kind of rode, you know, 130, 140, 150 a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Is she having any trouble now?
No, she's pretty healthy.
Good.
I don't think she has any side effects from type 1 at all. So
when you were figuring it out for yourself, did you ever go to her and say, like, did you try to trade war stories or tips and tricks, or was that not a thing you guys did together?
That really wasn't a thing. I think the one thing I do remember, she got moved over to Humalog before I did. You know, before that it was regular NPH. And when she got moved over to Humalog, she told me, "Oh, this is great. Like, you know, you can actually take it at 15 minutes before you eat." And so then that was like the one tip that she gave me that I actually followed and moved on and enjoyed it. You know, I liked that part, but other than that, we didn't really talk about it.
Were you close in other ways or not particularly?
Not particularly.
Yeah. Just the girl boy thing?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Did that change as you were adults?
I'd say it did not change much until our two boys were diagnosed.
Okay. Then she felt
and then
compelled.
Then it changed.
Yeah. Does she have children?
No, she doesn't.
Okay.
Not biological.
So what do you think happened inside of her when she saw your children get diagnosed?
I think she saw, you know, they were so young when it happened, and, you know, she loves them dearly. So when she sees something that she struggles with happen to them, I think it kind of opened up that door.
You think people realize that when their siblings show affection to your children, like when your siblings show affection to your children, that it's probably the affection they have for you, but it doesn't come out because you grow up together? You know what I mean?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Really something. And if you are very affectionate, you don't feel like you have to get it out some other way. So interesting.
Right.
Hey, cultural, religious, not coldness, but where does the way that your family interacted, where does that come from, do you think?
I don't think it's cultural. I don't think it's religious why it happens that way. I really kind of attribute it to just our family history is like neither side of the family is very, very much out there saying things like, hey, I really appreciate you. I love you. Is more on my mom's side. It was a lot of hitting people, joking around with people. And my dad's side was very, very, don't say I love you. Get the work done.
Yeah. What were their backgrounds?
What do you mean by backgrounds?
Irish, German.
There's a bit of Irish in there. My last name's Weirman, so it's about as German as you get. I think that's Irish and German. Is it pretty
interesting? My mom's parents were German, and you're describing them. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's interesting. Okay. All right. I got it. Well, how do you manage today? And is that different than how you managed before your kids got type 1?
It definitely is. Today, I am using Loop. Both boys are using Loop, and we're using Humalog in those pods. Using Dexcom G6. That all happened because of the boys. When Wesley was first diagnosed, he's our oldest boy. I was still MDI and using Humalog and Lantus. The Humalog was in a pen, of course. And when Wesley was first diagnosed 10 years ago,
yep.
I don't think Dexcom was really a thing then. Was it a thing 10 years ago?
10 years ago, Arden is 10. She had one then.
Yeah.
You just didn't know about it yet.
G4 maybe?
Yeah, I don't remember which one it was, but it existed.
Yeah.
And you were MDI till you were 35.
Yep.
Okay. And doing well or just okay?
A1Cs were right around 6 most of my life.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good.
And I don't think a lot of that there was definitely a roller coasters. Like it was probably a roller coaster ride up until I got to Dexcom.
Okay. You were always like chopping down highs and stopping lows?
Yeah.
So your standard deviation probably was off, but you weren't tracking that.
Right. Yeah. Couldn't see it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How do you see it? Interesting. And doctors told you were doing great. There was no ever.
That A1Cs were always good, and blood sugars, on paper, when you tested 4 times a day, looked good.
Yeah. Yeah. If you test at the right time, you just have to catch your blood sugar in the right spot. They have
right before you eat.
Yeah. 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 When your blood sugar is falling because you're hungry and you've used too much insulin at the last meal, and you test and you're like, oh, I'm 89. I'm really doing great at this. Not really thinking if I didn't eat now, I'd be 60 soon. Yeah. What a flawed system. Okay. So what happens, man, when they're diagnosed? Do you just go, this isn't good enough for them? Or like, what makes you dive in and get the rest of it?
That's a really good question. I don't remember the exact epiphany moment, but it probably centered around seeing something on social media. And when we dove in, like with Wesley, like we dove in, it was as soon as I kind of figured out what the Dexcom was, like our doctor had mentioned it to us, but, I had done many, many years MDI and just a tester and did fine. So I thought, well, what is this technology? Like, it's nothing, right? Mm-hmm. But after seeing online on social media, seeing what the Dexcom could do. And then what I really saw was the Dexcom G4 attached to a cell phone and Night Scout and being able to see numbers remotely. And I think that's what kind of made me dive in.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was like hardcore diving in.
And so what does he start with? A pump, a CGM, or how long was he MDI?
He was MDI for maybe a year or 2.
Okay.
And a lot of that had to do with because he was using such little insulin. Like none of the pumps, Omnipod, could not deliver insulin in small enough amounts at that point in time.
Right. And that's the same thing that happens to a lot of people. They're like, well, just do shots, because meanwhile, the shots they do a unit at a time. And, if you have half unit noodles and your kid's small enough, that's still not enough. Or small enough. So it's interesting how
that's what we were doing. We were doing like you were doing, seeing how much you could like pull back a quarter of a unit.
Yeah.
We did that for a long time. Had syringes that could do half units and then pens that could do half units.
Okay. And then probably about the time you're figuring out a pump for Wesley, then your next son is diagnosed?
Yeah, we had moved across the state and I was still doing business, in our old town. It's about a 2-hour drive away. I was over there for a meeting. Wife had called me and said that she had checked Cooper's finger because he had wet through his diaper the past couple of days. And that morning it was super heavy. And she said, well, I checked his finger and it was like, 450. At that point in time, my heart just dropped. And I said, why don't you guys, I'll call my mom and I'll have her come over and pick you guys up and drive over to where I was at, because that's where our other boy had gone to the endocrinologist at over at University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics, which is, our best hospital in the state for type 1.
Mm-hmm.
And said, hey, drive over here. While you're driving over here, give him like a quarter a unit of insulin to bring him down. And that's what happened. He came over and family came over and we went through that hell all over again.
Yeah, so soon after the last time too. The thing is, Jason, that's not why you're on the show. I just wanted to get your background. So for everybody, so they knew who you were and what you're living through. But you really wanted to come on today to talk about something completely different. So why don't you express to everyone why you're here?
Well, last year, which would be January-ish, 2023, my dad and mom.
Type 1 diabetes can happen at any age. Are you at risk? Screen it like you mean it. Because if just one person in your family has type 1, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too. So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can help you spot it early. And the more you know, the more you can do. So don't wait. Talk to your doctor about screening. Tap now or visit screenfortype1.com to get more info. And screen it like you mean it.
Both got COVID. My mom was able to, kind of maintain. She didn't have very bad symptoms. But my dad, because of his type 1 diabetes and his health history because of type 1 diabetes, we should probably talk about that slightly here. I think most of his life, his A1Cs were, 10, 11, 12, just because of poor management.
Yeah.
And that had a significant impact on his health. Like, he was a healthy guy. If you looked at him, he's a tough guy, skinny guy. He had quadruple bypass. And then probably 10 or 15 years after that, he had like 4 mini strokes, and everything kind of went downhill after that.
Mm-hmm.
And after the strokes, he kind of felt worthless, but didn't get around much, didn't try to rehab much because, what good was he if he couldn't do work type of thing.
What kind of work did he do?
He was an electrician. He had his own electrical business, and then he also worked at a company that makes gigantic industrial valves.
Okay.
He was a hands-on person that got down and dirty.
Right. And you describe him as robust, but with A1Cs in double digits.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's funny, as you're trying to talk about his physical characteristics and his health, what I really thought was, I wonder if he would have told you he loved you if his blood sugar was lower.
That very well could be.
Yeah. I wonder if he would have had more mental clarity and seen things differently.
Very well could be. Kind of mentioned that, like, after he kind of switched from MDI the majority of his life over to Omnipod 5, he seemed to take a lot more interest in type 1, and he seemed to soften up a bit. And his A1C had dropped down to like 7.
Yeah. Plus, he had something to focus on again, and a thing that he needed to be good at and learn and, work at. Yeah, it's interesting. Listen, there's a chameleon sitting behind me in a cage right now because my kids grew up and I don't have anything to take care of. So I got very stir crazy very quickly. Just trying to take care of all you guys wasn't quite enough for me. I was like, I needed something alive in front of me to work on and study and figure out what it needed. So, all right. Well, did that give you some time with him?
I'm going to say no. My dad's the type of guy that would, if you needed work done, he was there immediately. So we had an old house at that point in time, and he would come over frequently to kind of help me with things around the house and share his love with me that way. And even after he had his first stroke, like we had a huge windstorm roll through town and it like knocked over trees all over town. And our big tree in our backyard, it fell over and he came over even, suffering the consequences of a stroke where he can't move half his body very well with a chainsaw. And we're, chopping the tree apart and taking it down. And he was just trying to do his part, trying to help me and the family.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, listen, clearly he loved you. He just didn't. Yeah. He just didn't say it the way you were hoping for.
Right.
But look what it did for you. You're really open with your children and your family. I bet with your wife too. And, don't worry, that'll slingshot the other way and your boys will be quiet, strong men who won't say anything to anybody. You'll just bounce back and forth through all of eternity. Getting back to your dad's health and really the reason you wanted to be here. Your note to me is very simple. Just that, talking about hospice care and type 1 diabetes and being older with type 1 was something you want to talk about. And I know we don't talk about it enough. So I'm very interested. What was the, what was the course? What happened?
So after my dad was in the hospital with COVID, he was there for probably a week or so and just was not getting better. And we didn't go see him. So I was just talking with my mom over the phone because I didn't want to get COVID.
Yeah.
My mom had said, this is not looking good. I'd call him every day, talk to my mom every day. And my dad really wasn't able to talk while he was in the hospital doing this. He had his Omnipod 5 on. It was working great. My mom said, he's not eating much and he's got a super flat line and it's like at 100 all day long, all night. Like, well, that's great, but we need him to eat. Kept saying, as soon as you can, you got to probably get over here. And after his 10 days of being quarantined, my wife and kids and I went over there and saw him, and he's just kind of laying there, kind of comatose, not really knowing what's happening. He'd look at us every now and then, but quickly, close his eyes and just go back to sleep. The hospital staff, because he was on his Omnipod 5, they would not deal with that. Like they wouldn't touch it or interact with it. So my mom had to do all the stuff on it. Whenever something would happen, she had to change the pods, enter carbs, if he was eating anything or do any corrections. So she was left in charge of that because the hospital staff
refused to be involved.
Refused to be involved with it. And they also wanted to know, how much insulin he was getting for different things, whatever, if he eat some crackers or whatnot, they wouldn't know how much insulin he was getting for those crackers. It's kind of hard to say to my mom, you can't really tell him how much insulin he's getting because the algorithm is algorithming. It's doing its thing.
Right.
So they had no clue or idea on how to deal with a pump in that setting.
Probably, Jason, they probably didn't understand how to deal with it out of that setting either. But yeah.
Yeah, we'll learn about that here shortly.
Yeah. and they weren't interested. The bigger point is that they're not interested. They're going to chart what they need to chart, but like they're not going to touch it. They're not going to learn about it. That's not going to be a focus for them. When you said he was kind of comatose, like this is after 10 days with COVID, after his quarantine period?
Yeah. Like they're towards the end of his COVID stay for 10 days. Like he just would not recover. He kept sleeping more, just laying down more, not sitting up much, not opening his eyes, not talking.
What did you think was happening at that point?
Part of me, was hoping that he would make it through and be able to, return to somewhat normal life where it was at that point in time. But the other side of me knew that this is probably his last little bit of life that he's going to be spending in this hospital.
Yeah. How long ago was this?
This is last year, January.
Okay. Did you cognitively understand that his heart attack and his strokes were from high blood sugars, poor management?
Yes.
Okay.
Like 100%.
All right. So there's still other things happening inside of him that are also being impacted by that and have been for decades. And now, now this comes along and it's stressing every system.
Right.
What did you mean by I'll find out more? What happened next?
After his 10 days, it kind of decided, shortly after that they're going to call in hospice care because, he's struggling to breathe. He's not eating. He's he's not trying to live. The hospital staff decided to move him over to hospice care. And my mom said, yes, it's his time. Like, it's going to happen. So let's go ahead and do that. And once they moved him over to hospice care, they, stopped all medications besides morphine. And that unfortunately included insulin. Stopped giving him insulin after his last pod expired, and really didn't take any care or concern about his blood sugars at that point in time. Mm-hmm. They would check his blood sugars, but it'd be every 3-4 hours, and there was no response to the high blood sugar until I showed up at the hospital.
So I watched a hospital manage my mom to the end of her life. So if once they decide you're not coming back from this, they start removing all the things that keep your body going. And it's interesting when you're older and you've been sick for a long time, you don't think of it that way while you're alive and you're going like, this pill's for my blood pressure, this pill's for my, this and, my lipids, and this is happening. And what you really begin to understand in that time is that you have been artificially kept alive for so long. Like, you weren't going to die. Like, if you stop taking all your medication and doing all the things you're doing, you weren't going to just shut off. But the end of your life was going to be sped up without your heart medication or et cetera, whatever else you're taking. And then it's such a weird feeling when someone says we're going to discontinue those things, and you think, but those are the things that are keeping her healthy.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, even though I knew this is what we were doing, I didn't know this is what we were doing.
Right.
Like, we're going to take away all the things that are keeping this person alive, and to hasten the end of their life. You're trying to get to it faster because it just seems cruel to, if the end is the end and they're struggling, or, why would you keep that going any longer than you had to?
Right.
So you get to that situation, but the taking away of the insulin, can you not live with it? Like, what is that about there?
In my eyes, from, being type 1 myself, from my point of view, like, a high blood sugar is insanely uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Especially when you get up to 400 or 500, you get that thirst sensation that's unquenchable. Like, you have to drink something. In my eyes, when he was in hospice, they wanted him to be comfortable. They're shooting him full of morphine to make him comfortable. A little bit of insulin to bring him down to a somewhat normal level would make him more comfortable. I don't think it's like a blood pressure medicine or something like that, you don't feel it when you take it. You don't feel the results of it. You're not going to be uncomfortable if you don't take that medication for a day or 2 days or 3 days. But if you're going multiple days or multiple hours without insulin, and that blood sugar is, 400, 500, 600, that's incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody really thinks about that. I don't think the hospital staff thinks about that. I'm not even sure if his doctors thought about that. And I would be curious as to an endocrinologist's thought on that. Like, is that comfortable? Is it something that should be dealt with?
Yeah. But he was on morphine, right?
Yep.
So do you not think that they were just trying to hasten things by removing the insulin?
I don't think that crossed their mind. Like, them thinking of DKA wasn't on their radar.
And did you speak to them about that, or was that just your feeling?
I spoke to them about that adamantly, and I kind of explained my point of view, and we finally got them to come in and just give some small corrections throughout this last few days, and kind of get him down to a moderately okay level.
Yeah. But
it was hard. It was really, really difficult to get them to do anything. And when they decided, hey, we're going to do something, well, we agree to giving him insulin. It took them 2-3 hours to come back in with the insulin to give it to him. It was really slow.
Can you describe your state of mind during this time?
I was extremely pissed off because I'm used to dealing with type 1 diabetes now. You deal with it now. You don't let us sit. You don't do that. And just seeing how slow the process worked there. It was infuriating.
You think you were mad because you couldn't help your dad and you were looking for a way to help him?
Yes.
Yeah. Did they ever say to you, we're managing the end of his life now, we're not going to give him insulin?
Yeah, that was their perspective on it.
What was yours, though? Like, you knew that was happening. Were you okay with this? What was being done?
I wasn't okay with it at all. Like, I just can't, like, even if he was on morphine and out of it, not really aware of what was going on around him, I can't imagine your body not saying to you, hey, you're really thirsty. Your mouth is really dry right now. And you might have a headache. You might feel like you got to puke. You might feel all of these things, but you can't do anything about it because you're locked in this bed and you're locked inside your body.
Right.
Just sitting there and you can't do anything about it.
Were you okay with the idea that he was dying? Like, and that the plan was he was in hospice now to get to the end of his life? Or did you think he should be fighting?
After seeing him in the hospital, after he kind of had his quarantine from COVID, like, I knew that it was coming. Like, I could see it coming. I think kind of that made it a little bit easier to deal with, but I still didn't want him go through that process and suffer from type 1 diabetes still.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really the aspect of it. Like, not that you're okay with his passing, but you're okay with what we're doing. I know what we're doing. He's going to pass away. We're managing towards that. But just like emotionally and psychologically, you couldn't stop taking care of his diabetes.
Right.
Yeah. Do you know why? Do you have any thoughts about it? You go to a therapist? Anything?
No therapy.
No.
I just listened to that episode of the podcast with the therapist on it. So that's my...
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure she'd be thrilled that that's your therapy.
Hey, the grounding method helped me tremendously. So thank you for recording that episode.
Oh, did it really? Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
You're stuck in this conundrum where the plan is we're going to take away my dad's stuff. He's going to pass away, but I can't let it be his insulin. So did you talk them into giving it to him eventually?
Yeah, we talked to him. I really had to push. Like, my mom was, out of it. She had just recovered from COVID and dealing with, her husband passing away, or in the process of passing away. She was just kind of there nodding her head, agreeing with everything and not necessarily always remembering what she agreed to. But I finally convinced her to say, we really need to do something about this. Can you please ask, the hospice care people and the doctor or nurse, whoever, to come in and let's talk about this. I kind of, when they came in, I kind of put my foot down and said, having the blood sugar this high is not comfortable. And you guys want him to be comfortable. So we're going to do something about it. And eventually, that they said, okay. And then, 3 hours later, they come in and do something about it.
Yeah. It's tough because they don't get very assertive, but like they could have made the argument that DKA could help him pass away.
Right.
It's such a weird thing. Like, you're turning the body off. You know what I mean? Like, the person's dying to begin with, and you have all these artificial things in place to keep that from happening. So they take them away. It's interesting. They must have seen, you must have been really pissed, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You must have scared them into doing it. And they probably thought he's going to die one way or the other if we give him this insulin or not. So let's just make the family happy and do this.
Yeah. And that's kind of like my point of view on hospice is that, yeah, make the patient, the person dying, happy or comfortable. And you got to make the family comfortable also. They got to be comfortable with the process. Him suffering from high blood sugar along with dying wasn't something that I was willing to really compromise too much on.
Yeah. Well, and you didn't. So after you got the insulin, what happened afterwards? Did they keep managing the insulin? He wasn't obviously eating. They took his intravenous, his IVs away as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
They took all that away. So they would just come in, every however many hours in between, checking his blood sugar, coming back, 30, 40 minutes later to give him a small correction dose. And of course, I agreed with them that we shouldn't try to bring him down to a normal level because he can't eat or drink anything at this point in time. So it was just let's get him close to 200. So they'd come in quite frequently after that and just give him small correction doses.
How long did he last after that?
So he was in the hospital like a total 25 days. 10 of those were heavy COVID stuff. And then 15 of those were kind of all downhill from there type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think he was in hospice care for probably just shy of a week.
How were you there all the time, or how did you guys manage that?
No, we weren't there all the time. We went over there. It's like an hour drive from our house to where the hospital was at.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd drive over every day and see him because we have 3 kids that are still in school at that point in time.
Yeah.
So we had to kind of maintain a somewhat normal life. And, my dad being the workaholic guy, he would have agreed with that. He would have been okay with that.
Okay with it. He would have been like, "What are you doing here? Staring at me?"
Yeah. That's exactly what he would say.
Yeah. Go make some money. Help somebody.
Yeah. Help somebody do something.
Yeah. How are they going to know that you love them if you're not working?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. I have nothing but sympathy and respect for the process. I can tell you that in my mom's hospital room, at one point, I sort of just went to a corner where I wasn't in her sight, even though I don't know that she could have seen me to begin with. And I don't know how to explain that I silently screamed and gritted my teeth so hard I thought they were going to break, because I had come to the realization that there was nothing left to do.
Right.
And that was a terrible feeling for a person like myself, who, seems to be minded towards caring for people to begin with. And, just as her son, and my brothers were there. And I had grown up in a very hybrid situation where I was parenting my brothers and their brother at the same time. So now we're there, and I'm in my 50s and my brothers are, in their 40s. And I still feel like on some level, they're my, like, they need me to say something or do something or be something. And at the same time, I'm having my own very personal, experience. And it was very upsetting is not the right word, but I thought I was going to break my teeth while I was silently screaming and through my chest is what was happening.
Yeah.
It's just maybe, I don't see how anything's worse than this,
Yeah. It's a weird trip to lose a parent. It's just something you can't know about until it happens.
Right. It's not something you can prepare yourself for. So if it happens to you too early in life, I can see where it would really just get to you in a different way. And even though I was 50 and had lived through my kid getting diabetes and all the other things that had happened, I do think I was more prepared for it because of that. But I'd say that when it's over, your perspective levels up again. And I thought I had some pretty high perspective from living through type 1 diabetes and, every day realizing that a little too much of this at the wrong time. And, that could be it. Like even last night, I'm still trying to adjust Arden's insulin back properly because she's using that GLP.
Yeah.
And she got into the mid 50s last night at like 1:30 in the morning. And I let it go for a couple of minutes and she's not seeing this. So I texted her and she didn't answer me. So I got out of bed and I walked into another room so I wouldn't wake up my wife. And I called her just to arouse her and get her awake. And she texted me and I said, hey, just drink a half a juice. But in those couple of minutes, like the couple of minutes where you're like, she'll be okay. She's low, but she'll be okay. Okay, she's not taking care of it. Like she's not waking up. I'll wake her up. I woke her up. That's good. She drank something. I see her blood sugar coming back up. That whole time's only like 10 or 12 minutes, And in that time, like standing there with my phone in my hand, I thought everything in my house looks so normal right now. Like everything looks like every other day. I walked downstairs and let the dogs out while I was doing this. Like, but is Arden going to die right now? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't think about it that way day to day. But last night I was probably just the right mixture of woozy, a little asleep, a little awake, where I didn't, manage myself that way. And I thought, wouldn't it be weird if like everything was so normal in the world and she just disappeared? Right. And you know what I mean? And then she's like texting me. She's like, I drank it. And I'm like, okay. And then I was like, she'll be fine. But a lot of people don't live in that space, you know? And so I thought I had some pretty massive perspective about what's important in life and where to focus and those sorts of things. Then my mom died and I thought, wow, I didn't think I was going to be able to level up, but here it is. I hope nothing else terrible fucking happens because I'm good with where I'm at now. As far as perspective, I don't need any more, you know? But I don't know. Maybe more will come still, Jason. I'm not sure.
Yeah, something that similar thing happened to me too. Like, you know, the past year, my dad's health has just been terrible. And watching him kind of start falling down that ladder ramped up my anxiety. You know, what really kind of got my anxiety really wound up is thinking, what if I get low and I die? Or what if I get low and crash the car and die? Who's going to take care of my family? Like, who's going to be there for them? And it's a hard thing to think about.
Do you think you're examining your mortality in that, or do you think you're reacting to the idea that your father's gone? Because you know, before that, if you would have died, he would have taken care of your family.
I think it was just it's amplified by him having these health issues and seeing him being the guy that if you needed something done, you call him. At that point in time, you know, I wasn't able to call him anymore because he couldn't do these things for us anymore. So it's kind of like I'm stepping up into that role.
Yeah, it's me now. There's nobody behind me anymore.
Right.
Yeah. The way that happens to me is I imagine everybody I've ever been related to standing in a line at a cliff. They fall off the cliff as they die. And then my mom went off and I was like, oh shit, I'm next. Like there's no one in front of me in this line anymore.
Right.
You know, that was the thing that got me. I was like, you know, it's my dad and my uncle and my aunt and like all these people, even though I wasn't even that close to them, like all these people, like I felt like if they were alive, I was going to be alive because age and chronology, you know, et cetera, even though that's completely ridiculous. I'm sure the guy standing on that bridge in Baltimore didn't think they were going to die right before that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But in my mind, that's always what comforted me. I'm like, there's more people to go before it gets to me. And then my mom passes away and I'm like, there's no one left standing between me and the edge of this cliff. And yeah, that's when you start doing things like, you know, trying to put away more money and talking to your kids about stuff that you're like, they're probably like, why the hell are they explaining this to me? Like that kind of stuff, you know? Yeah. And actually it's funny. My dad left my mom and I can look back and see that he was planning it for a while. And the one way that I really like this kind of touch point for me is I was like, I don't know, I was 12 and he drugged me into the basement one day to explain how the fuse box worked. And like, I remember at the time thinking like, this is cool. My dad and I are doing something together. You know what I mean? And like trying to understand the fuse box. And I felt like I did understand it. And I was like, oh, cool. Look at me. Like they were the old screw and glass ones, you know? And well, you know, your dad's an electrician. Like, and I was like, oh, wow. And then I look back some years later and I think, oh, he was just explaining to me how to take care of the house because he was going to leave. And I don't know that it's any different with dying, except maybe you don't plan to die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I've been slowly doing that. Like ever since I started really feeling that anxiety, like slowly dropping those little hints or knowledge on my wife. Like, you know, if you need to take care of this with Loop, this is where you should go and look at it. Do you want to look at it? And she'd say, no, of course. But
you're thinking, well, look at it in case my body explodes and I'm not unexpectedly.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, how are you making out getting through that anxiety?
Well, you know, after learning about the grounding method from the Juicebox podcast, subscribe, turn downloads on, that stuff. That episode on grounding, I probably have listened to that 10 times.
Oh, no kidding.
I've kind of picked out things within those grounding methods that kind of really help me. And I've gotten pretty good at making it happen quick when I start to feel that anxiety come on. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I can usually just look at something and I kind of start describing it in my head, how it would feel, how it would touch, how it would feel when I touch it, what it smells like. And it kind of calms me down to a point to where I can let my mind move on to something else.
It's episode 913. It's called the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And it's just Erica, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has type 1 diabetes for like forever, like over 30 years. And I have her on to talk about this kind of stuff. It's where where we pick a topic and then normally it devolves into me talking about how I feel. She and I did this grounding method. What is it? It's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can.
Yeah, it's like see, touch, feel them. Something, those 5 things just to get your mind to focus on something else.
Yeah.
I just kind of picked out of those methods, just like what things would feel like if I were to touch them, just the general shape of things and things like that. That really helped me.
Yeah. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method involves identifying 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. And by doing so, it shifts your focus from anxiety-provoking thoughts to a present moment. And it works for you, huh?
It most definitely works for me.
That's very cool. Well, it's a shame you're not going to have any more kids because I think we could have got a Scott out of you for sure, but that's all right.
I would have named him Dave. Go with it.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, that would have been the way to go. Well, I'm grateful that it helped you. I wish you guys all knew that most of what the podcast is the thoughts that I have standing in the shower in the morning. And I bet you people would want to know about this. There's no production meeting or anything like that. Nobody's telling me what to do or say. One day I got it in my head. I was like, I heard about this method. I watch people do it. I thought, boy, that makes sense. And then I listened to some people online talk about it. I was like, wow, this helps a lot of people. I'm going to ask Erica if she knows about this. And really was the extent of it. And to hear that it made it all the way to Iowa and to you, and that it was valuable for you while your father is passing away and afterwards, it's very heartwarming for me. So I appreciate you sharing that with me because, day to day, it just feels like I sit in this room and click on things. And talk and make sure this thing's in front of my face when I do it.
That's right.
Yeah. But to know that it actually works out, I'm working on something now for the podcast for later, and it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a lot of me sitting here and talking to myself. I'm not going to tell you what I'm planning yet. And it's hard. It's hard to get the energy up for it. It's hard to have an engaging conversation by yourself in a room. One of those things, anybody that can do that, I have a lot of respect for. Stand-up comedians, even get feedback, from a crowd. But even though you can make the argument that they're on their own up there, but I am not getting any feedback. So I have to kind of imagine how you feel while I'm doing it. And I slowed down on that project because it's just such a slog.
Yeah.
You saying this to me, honestly, will help me get energy up to finish it up and get it out to you guys. It's a ton of, I almost cursed, but it's a ton of, I'm going to curse anyway. It's a ton of work. And I don't get any, nobody at the end of the day is you're doing a good job or try harder or do this differently. I'm on my own to figure out what it is. Anyway, I appreciate it very much and it'll be helpful to me. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, keep taking showers, Scott, and keep coming up with good ideas.
Well, hell, if I stop taking showers, we have bigger problems than the podcast falling apart. Right. Keep taking showers. Oh my God. Jason, you just named the episode.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, we need you to keep coming up with good ideas, and I'll keep posting in the Facebook group, try and help people and help you come up with ideas. You're definitely doing a real job. You got to think of all those podcasters, YouTubers. These jobs didn't exist 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard for some people to say that what you're doing is a job and you deserve compensation for it. You definitely do. And I think you're doing a fine job of it. And
thank you.
Top of the game type of job.
Yeah.
And I think you deserve to be paid. And however you get that money, you get that money.
Well, I'm not human trafficking people like P. Diddy, allegedly.
That's damn right.
Yeah. So
you're just taking money from Omnipod and Dexcom and Cozy Earth. And
I'm older, so I'm still slightly embarrassed to be a podcaster. Not embarrassed, but there's a little piece inside of me. It's you don't really, that's not a real job. Your dad,
it's
your dad
wouldn't
think I'm doing a real job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my dad, it's funny. My father, while not an electrician, did all the electrical work at the rubber molding plant that he worked at. So your dad and my dad were pretty similar people as far as what they did for a living. He worked in an industrial situation, big, heavy machines that it was his job to take care of. and keep them running. And then when nothing broke, they would just point him to the floor and he'd go work on the floor. And, you know, like he was the maintenance supervisor, but there were days he came home where he just, you know, he did the grind too. Like they put him in front of a machine and said, you know, make 10,000 of these things come out of here by the end of the day. I think if I would have told my dad, you know, that I'm going to do this, I think he'd be like, what do you mean? Like, you know, like go do something, like go work on something. My mom never understood exactly what I was doing. Like she was older by the time I was really at it. And she's just like, she knows I talk to people like through the internet. Like that's basically what she understood about it. And I think my kids make fun of me because I feel like I have a 12-year-old's job. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's funny, like to older people, you're not really working. And to younger people, they're like, oh my God, are you on TikTok right now? Like I get notes all the time. Please stop doing this. Like, or they'll send me links of myself, like trying to get people to listen to the podcast. And like, don't do this ever again. And I'm like, look, like if you can get people to listen a different way, like let me know what it is. But right now, this is how the world works. And, you know, I'm stuck standing in front of a light talking into my phone, telling you that episode whatever came out today and you should check it out. Yeah. And anyway, I appreciate you very much. Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have?
I don't think so. I think we hit all the bases there and got them.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you said keep taking showers, because I was down to like using the word hospice in the title, and I was like, oh God, no one's going to listen to that. They're just going to be like, no, thank you. Not on a Tuesday. But it's just very important conversation. Jenny said to me the other day, we were doing just a pump. I think we did like a pump and CGM overview. I think we did. That's how much I do this. And during that, she said, are we going to talk about, you know, older type 1s and how none of this technology is made for their fingers or their eyes, you know, or their ability to work on stuff. And we talked about it for a minute, but like, there's not much to talk about, like, because what are you saying to a pump company? Like, go make something for a person at the end of their life. And they're going to say, right, oh, they'll get somebody to help them with it. Like, we can't just make a product for that small number of people, but it's still a big deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to get older one day and your fingers are going to shake. And, you know, if you're lucky, they're just going to shake. And how are your eyes going to be? And how are you going to understand? Like, do you think you could have taught Loop to your father?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So, you know, when that becomes the standard of care and algorithm, like, how do you, I mean, he made out okay on Omnipod 5 though, right?
Yeah, he did, but I think a lot of that had to do with my mom helping him. I think a lot of that comes down to his mobility too. Like him being an electrician for the majority of his life, his hands were beat to shit.
Yeah.
So they could hardly register when he touched a touch screen, you know, that thought he was dead already. And so she had to do some of the button pushing for him when it wouldn't work for him. And he didn't have the dexterity in his hands to put pods on, so she had to do that for him.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of, you know, shows that some of these things need to be taken into consideration with an aging population or a population that doesn't have the that mobility or ability anymore.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I worked in sheet metal from the time I was 16 until I was in my 20s, and you know, it wasn't even that long, and the skin on my hands is still like, it's hard to put into words. Like I haven't done a real job in a long time, and my fingers are still very dry all the time. Stuff slips out of my hands a lot. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but whatever Spider-Man has, I have the opposite, you know, and I was always touching, you know, this is back before people paid attention to things. My hands were we used to wash our hands in paint thinner.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. My dad did that.
Yeah. You know, of course. Like, how do I get this grease off me quickly so I can go eat lunch? Paint thinner. Yeah. You know, and then they finally came out with that soap that scrubbed it off. And, you know, you're like, oh, wow, look at the advancement here in my life. I'm not using paint thinner anymore to clean my hands. There are still days I think I'm just going to wake up with lung cancer one day. And I don't smoke or lead an unhealthy life at all. But I worked in that place long enough. I'm like, hopefully it's not going to get me. But, you know, I don't know that it can. You know, I worked in an industrial situation before people were like, you know, wear your personal protective gear. They were
right.
Yeah. I made $5 an hour.
Well, maybe that's why Maybe that's why you have your good podcast voices from breathing in all that you shouldn't be breathing in.
Wouldn't that be great? The thing that propelled me at the end also got him. Boy, we'll need somebody to write that on my tombstone. Anyway, Jason, nothing like talking about death with somebody at 9 a.m. This was great.
It was perfect.
I really did appreciate though, and I appreciate you. I imagine you know that. But thanks very much for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. It was a pleasure.
Hold on one second. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info. Arden started using a contour meter because of its accuracy, but she continues to use it because it's durable and trustworthy. If you have diabetes, you want the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. There's already so many decisions. Let me take this one off your plate. ContourNext.com/juicebox. A huge thank you to Eversense CGM for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Are you tired of having to change your sensor every 7 to 14 days? With the Eversense CGM, you just replace it once every 6 months via a simple in-office visit. Learn more and get started today at eversensecgm.com/juicebox. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. The episode you just heard was professionally edited by Wrong Way Recording. WrongWayRecording.com. Jason has type 1 diabetes. He was diagnosed at 18. He's 45. His son Wesley is 12, was diagnosed when he was 2. His son Cooper is 10, diagnosed at 11 months. He also has a daughter. She is 6. She does not currently have type 1 diabetes. His sister got type 1 diabetes when she was 14. His father had type 1 diabetes since he was 3. He passed away when he was 69. He had bypass, some small strokes, COVID, and then he passed after that. We basically talked about hospice. In this one, we're going to call it Keep Taking Showers. Maybe 5 or 6 curses in this one, Rob. He had a good mic. I keep shutting off the recording and then saying more stuff to you. Anyway, hope you're having a good day.